we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but because they were born to honor the thin blue line. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, your host of the LEO First Podcast, and I'm coming back to you with another amazing episode. Today is a very interesting day. Now, by the time you hear this podcast, it's probably going to be a few months after, but if you don't know, I live pretty much between Beaumont and Houston. I go back and forth. I have places in both. And surprisingly, in the middle of October, it's in the low 50s. Now, I'm not a cold person at all, and this weather is throwing me off. Yesterday, I went to the gym, and I actually had to wear a hoodie. Like, I was very confused. And now some of you that are in the north, you're like, Michael, what's wrong with you? It's only the 50s. Well, I was born and raised in Miami. I've lived in South Texas, Southeast Texas, and Louisiana. None of these states that I've lived in sees snow, nor does it see a lot of cold weather. For Michael Laidler, when it's in the 50s, it is chilly. When it's in the 40s and the 30s, you may not even find me outside. So needless to say, I'm having a little bit of a chilly morning, but I haven't left the house yet. And I'm just excited because the guest we have on, he's actually based out of San Antonio. And we were kind of joking. You all know my background. I've spent some time in Border Patrol, and during that time I was in Laredo. And if you look on the map, if you don't know where Laredo's at, I usually tell people you find San Antonio, which you're going to find a lot easier, and go about 2 hours south, and that's Laredo. So the fact that he's in San Antonio now, I know he can appreciate the jokes when I talk about weather, because I was actually teasing him when he was like, oh, it's a little bit cooler. I'm like, man, you get like a half a day of cold in San Antonio. So what are we talking about that is actually cool right now? But needs to say, today's actually a nice, cool day. At some point, I'm going to go to the gym, and hopefully by the time I leave the house, hopefully it's more in the 70s or so, more my wheelhouse. But it is nice not to have the AC running and struggling and begging for mercy. But as you all know, the podcast is talking about stuff like this, what's going on in our lives. And ultimately, it's designed to humanize the badge and humanize people that are in all types of uniform, whether it's police, corrections, other first responders like firefighters, EMS, whoever impacts it and is involved in this high stressful environment. And what you all are going to hear today, the person you're going to hear from, has experienced a few things, and he's also working on a lot of good things. And while we were talking in the green room, we were talking about different areas to approach and different things. So I will tell you one thing you will hear that I haven't had on the first 60 or so episodes. You're going to hear a poem. He's really into poetry, and it's cool because especially if you check him out on his Instagram and some stuff on LinkedIn, you'll see some of the stuff that he's doing. But he said, hey, Michael, can I do this? And I was like, yeah, this is the LEO First Podcast. Why can't you do this? We are literally designed to be sporadic and organic and authentic. And if you want to say a poem, cool. It's something that I believe will benefit. Now, I'm not a poetry person. I don't know how to write one. I probably don't know how to listen to the benefits. But when I do hear people's passion, and I've seen people perform it at all different levels, it's always impressed me because I know how much it takes. I actually remember back in high school when they tried to make me write poetry, I think I pretty much called in sick, so to speak. I found those days to get away from everything. But based the fact that he's doing it, I'm impressed. So needless to say, let me kind of introduce him a little bit more, because now hopefully I got you all excited. Today's guest is Antonio Santana. I did not mess up his name because at first I called him Sanders, which is weird because in my phone it actually said Santana. But today we have Antonio Santana, prior Marine, prior law enforcement, but now he's continuing on with his path of increasing all of our wellness. One of the things we're going to talk about is Wellness Empowered and what he's doing with that app and some of the things that he's really trying to push. But I'm excited to have him on. We connected through IG and we have built this, wellness relationship. And I know that whenever I meet anybody that has that background, it always makes me excited because that's what we need. No matter what we're doing or what we think we're doing, there's just not enough people, in Michael Laidler's opinion, that's really focused on wellness. And if there was, we wouldn't see some of the suicidal rates. We wouldn't see some of the depression. We wouldn't see some of the alcoholism, drug abuse at the high rates that we have if we had enough. So ultimately, there's always a need for that. And right now, I know he's leaving a dent in that area of wellness. So without further ado, I'm going to remove the pen from my screen. I will allow Mr. Santana, Antonio Santana. What do you want to talk about today on the LEO First podcast?
Man, brother, appreciate it for having me on here. One of the biggest things that you just said right now about the poetry, I was the same boat, man. I never thought that I could actually write poetry. When I always tell people about that I write poetry, and they're like, "And you are a Marine and you write poetry, or you write with crayons?" It's always the same jokes, right? But
yeah,
the thing about it is that I started writing poetry when I started going to therapy and talking to my therapist. She basically told me, "Hey, I want you to start writing your journal entries." So my journal entries, when I was sharing with her, she's like, "This is actually poetry." And I started sharing, and she's like, "Have you ever thought about writing a book or everything?" And I was like, "Nah, like I've never thought about that." But I started sharing some of my poetry with some of my guys, whatever like that, some of my friends, and everybody that read my poems, they were just like, "Bro, how are you in my head right now?" So it kind of gave me a different perspective of what our guys are actually facing and what we're not showing, right? So, like I told you, like when we were in the green room, I told you I was like, yeah, I was in the Marine Corps, I was, combat tours, I was in law enforcement and all this. And I don't really like to talk about all of that stuff because I think what's more impactful is what we're doing to solve an issue that, our community is facing right now. Mm-hmm. So right before I got, and what kind of drove me to that is right before I got out of law enforcement, dealing with everything that I was doing with, investigations, all of the past that I had from the military, everything that I had, my childhood, all of that, never worked on myself, never actually even acknowledged it. Right. It was something that I just kept bearing down and everything like that. One of the biggest things is I put myself through school so that I had all of these things in my head that I was worried about and not worried about what was internally going on with me. Right. So, I remember I was working and I was driving 2 hours to go to my job. I was going full-time school. We had a 3-year-old daughter. My wife was pregnant with our second daughter, everything like that. I was working on this investigation that was just so time consuming. And I remember that I was driving back into San Antonio and it hit a point where all of those voices that I had in my head I couldn't contain them anymore and I couldn't stop them anymore. So I remember that I pulled over on the side of the road in this old country road in Texas, pulled over, pulled out my service pistol and was about to commit suicide. And at that point, like while I was sitting there crying and everything like that, my wife sent me a picture of my daughter. And when I say this, there was nothing in me that was holding me back from doing that. Nothing at all. Like my mind was already made up. And when my wife sent me a picture of my daughter, one of the realizations happened right there and then was that this pain and this anguish that I was going through at that point was not going to be killed by me, right? I was just going to pass it on to my kids. And everything that, my daughter that hadn't even been born yet would have never even met me. My daughter was always going to be wondering if there could have been something that she could have done. My wife would have, because I never even had opened up to my wife about what was going on with me, right? And I put my gun away. I did the drive back home, pulled into the driveway. And the first thing happened when I walked into the doors, my daughter was there and she said, "Daddy's home." And it killed me. I walked upstairs, cried again. And I didn't quit my job. That's the crazy thing about it, is that I didn't quit. I stayed on for another year. And it wasn't until my wife gave me an ultimatum of like, quit your job or we're going to get divorced. I don't like what's going on here. I don't like what you're doing. Quit your job or we're getting a divorce. Got out, joined, went into the VA, trying to, I always thought this, right? Like once I got to the VA, that they were just going to welcome me with open arms, right? They were just going to be like, hey, we've been waiting for you, blah, 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 whatever like that. It was not that. I walked in the door and basically told me that they couldn't give me any services for a while because they didn't have any therapists. And so I was like, okay. I was like, what are my options? They're like, well, we can shove pills down your throat. And I was like, shove pills down my throat. I was like, okay, so numb me further. I was like, all right, well, that was my only option. I took it, right? And I continued to go through the VA system. And what I saw through the VA system is such a broken system, right? It was so many barriers of why these individuals would stop seeking help. What made them want to, nothing in there was compassionate. It made you feel like you need to come here, right? Like everything was just reasons why not to go. That's all I saw. And finally found the right therapist. And that brings us back to this whole thing about finding the right therapist and having her share with me that I should start writing and all of that. But in all of that, I saw such a broken system that in many ways was, yes, it's one thing about say you're helping an individual, right? But it's like, how are you helping them? Are you reaching the issue? Are you really reaching the root of the problem? Or are you just masking it with more narcotics or whatever, more medicine and stuff like that? Are you really solving the issue? Or are you just putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem? And that's kind of where I started seeing that a lot more needed to be done. And I started first, just like this, started having these conversations, wrote my first book, actually listened to my therapist, and I wrote my first book, and it's called My Journey Through Words. And just through that, I started talking to a lot more people and everything like that. Was on a couple of podcasts. And I'm like, man, I really do feel like this is my calling. I think one of the things is, and I'm sure this is the reason why you're doing this. I didn't ask you this, but when I got out and you lose your badge, you lose your identity, it's very difficult to find who you are, right? Because for so many years you wore the uniform, you had that badge, and that made you who you were, right? And there was no self-reflection of who the hell am I truly, right? So like once you lose that badge, you lose that uniform, now who am I? And for so many years, I stood there wondering, like, what am I supposed to be doing? I had this servant's heart that felt like I was a tool that wasn't being used. And there's so much inside of me that I still want to give. And I feel that I can be impactful to my community. It's like, how do I do that, right? So we started a conversation. I mean, it was just a conversation, just a podcast, just talking about mental health, how mental health really is. Because I think a lot of us, I think now it's becoming more open to these conversations. But I think before it was still, let's talk about mental health, but to a certain extent, because we don't want everybody to like think we're crazy or all of that. And I think you have to have those serious, tough conversations to really truly see what our guys are facing every day, right? What they are seeing every single day and what they are battling internally. That's how we're going to get past, the numbers that we have right now, 22 a day, which really it's 41 a day. The numbers for percentage of police officers right now that are being killed by suicide, more than actually being killed in the street.
Correct.
Things like that. Like those are tough conversations that we need to have. And we can't shy away from those conversations. So we had them, right? But having people on the podcast and talking to them, I realized more needed to be done. And so what I did is I thought about opening a nonprofit, not my wheelhouse at all. But I was like, you know what? All these guys are ready to get that help. But there's so many barriers that are stopping them, right? There's a stigma within the units. There's all of this stuff, whatever like that. So what if they had an option to be able to go and get help without jumping through hoops? And we opened up our nonprofit. And at that time, our local police department was having one of the highest suicide rates in the entire country. So when we started receiving a lot of these people coming in, right? A lot of these officers coming in. A lot in the The ugly part about it is we were having a lot of the family members of these police officers that had committed suicide come in and get help. And having these conversations with them really made me realize that more needed to be done. As much as I was already providing these services, and yeah, like that is great, but like, what else can we do here, right? Because if you look at the system right now, if you look at what's out there for first responders, for veterans, when you say you're being proactive when it comes to their mental health, really it's all reactive. Everything out there, the research that I did, everything was reactive in nature. And we're making these individuals make a judgment call when they are faced their worst of their worst, their darkness. When they are sitting there with their darkness, they have to make a judgment call to call out 988 or call somebody. How many of those numbers of those people make that phone call? How many do? Yeah. So we're running that risk of these individuals not making that call. So, and I'm sorry, man.
Go ahead. No, you do your thing. Hey, I'm listening. I'm all into it. So yeah. I don't stop the flow unless I need to stop it. But you're flowing. Keep going.
No, and that's why we got started, man. And you know, we started seeing a lot of these family members, and because I'm very open about my suicide attempt, right? So I had a lot of these families that wanted some questions to be answered, right? They want to know a little bit more about why their husbands did this. Why did they take that last step? That step that couldn't be taken back. Like, why did they do this, right? So like I sat there with them and talked to them, like, why they asked me, like, why were you going to do this? Like, why? And then, you know, the more and more of those conversations I had, man, the more and more I felt so responsible for what I could have done to my family, you know, that what I could have done to the pain that they would have had, the anguish that they would have had, like what I would have done to them. And I felt so hurt of what I could have done, even though I didn't do it, right? But I was at that verge. My mind was made up. And if it wasn't for my daughter that my wife sent me that picture, I would have not. And then what would have happened?
Correct.
I would have done something that I could not take back, an action that I couldn't, a pain that I was transferring over to my kids that I can't withdraw away from them, that I can't hug them harder to make sure that they know that I love them and I care for them. I wouldn't be able to do that because I would be gone. So having these conversations with these people and talking to them, hearing their stories and everything like that, one of the things that I want to tell your audience, and I want to tell a lot of your guys, is that your trauma and your pain, it's not bad. And hear me out when I say this, right? What it makes you is more empathetic to individuals around you. Once you have processed through those stages in your career, processed through all of the emotions that you've gone through, it makes you empathetic to individuals like yourself. And what that does is you want to go out and help everybody, even though right now you might still want to go and help people, but it's a different way, right? It's a different way. When you start breaking down the layers of yourself and you start seeing the reality of us as a society walking around with masks, that's all we do. We don't want people to truly see what's going on inside of us, so we put on a mask. We get to our home, and sometimes even in our homes with our kids and our wives, where we should feel our safest, we wear a mask because we don't want them to truly see what is going on with us, right? We want them to see that we are okay. They want us to see that nothing is going on, that we have it together. So when do we take that mask off? And when does that mask become who we are? And do we truly know who we are then? I think once you start processing through the things that you're going through, that is when you actually truly understand who you are. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell, brother. That's how we've gotten all of this started.
I think I found the title of your podcast today's podcast. Because I'm listening very intently to what you're saying. So what when you were saying that, I was like, oh man, that's going to be a good title for his podcast. When do you take the mask off? Ooh, I like that.
I love that, brother.
Oh, Antonio, I like that. When do you take the mask off? Yeah, I like that as a title. Oh, yes. Now, that might even be a good title for your next book. I mean, you just never know. I mean, that might be something you might want to take your own note. Like, man, you know what? I was on a podcast with Mike and we came up with a whole title. I done based a whole book just on that. Or
Yeah.
a speaking series or a podcast series, but you're right. And as I heard you telling some of your story, and I know you don't talk a lot about your background, but I know part of your background was dealing with in corrections. And
Yeah.
to me, one of the even more underserved population when it comes to law enforcement is corrections. And
Yeah.
what I didn't realize before I ever got into it, because before I even became into corrections, I was already a police officer, border patrol. So all I knew was field work. And all I knew was how to arrest them and send them somewhere. I knew that part. I knew how to book them in. And what I didn't realize is the confinement of space that you're in, and you're hearing people's issues all day long. There really is no break. And when it comes to the mental side of it, there's people that have this mask on that when they do go home, like because they've had to have it on at work too, like it's just like a nonstop thing. So the fact that you're bringing some of this enlightenment to law enforcement at all levels, I think is extremely important. So I do want to hit this while it's fresh on my mind, and the fact that we've already warmed people up to it so much. You said you had a poem. You ready for it? You ready to deliver it?
Yeah. 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 So like I said, man, I write a lot about what I've gone through, but also I write some of the stuff for our guys. So this one is titled "I'll Fight for You." So I fight for you, even if you don't know me. I fight for you, even if you don't care to know me. Battered and bruised, but I keep fighting. I run towards danger when many run away. I run towards danger, even if I fear being judged by my peers. Fear is within me, but I still run towards that storm. My mission is to stand between darkness and the people I swore to protect. My mission is to put my body on the line to protect you. The front line between darkness and you is where I stand. The front line between darkness and you is where I'll lay down my life. I'll fight for you, even if you don't know me.
Ooh, so
They're
that is
very
what.
simple. They're
Oh,
very simple. I can tell you. One of the things I tell people when they're like, oh, so you write poetry? I was like, it's dumb man's poetry, brother. It's dumb man's poetry. It's just, I'm not making you second guess of what the actual poem is about. Like go straight to what it is about, man. But I think a lot of our,
we're
I think about a
simple.
lot of our guys. Huh?
Yeah, we're simple. I told you before in the green room. People will know me. I'm simple. I need things that are getting right to the point. Hey,
Yep.
tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I need to understand. And your poem hits that. Like it's like, hey, I know I know what the message is. I don't know. You're right. There's some, and maybe that's what happened to me when I was in high school. Maybe it was the poetry where I had to like figure things out, and I was just like, wait, what? I don't understand that they said that they just committed a crime, but they didn't commit a crime. Like, I don't understand where we're going with this. I need direct poetry. So no,
Yeah.
hey, Tonio, I loved it.
No, and the thing about it is that the reason why is like we see society nowadays and they keep diminishing what police officers what they do, bro. Like and not just all police officer, all first responder community, but police officers right now are given such a bad name, and they do so much for us, right? And like I had this one police officer on my podcast about 2 weeks ago, and she's like, oh, I'm thank you for having me on. I haven't been on the job for that long, and and I don't have a lot of stories. And I was like, look, you don't have to apologize. Like you're doing a job that half of the country would not do. More than half of the country.
I'll say more than half.
More than half of the country would not do. And you're doing something for us. You're standing in between us and the darkness, between us and the bad guy. You are standing there, not me. I'm not doing that anymore. You are. So for you to raise your hand and say that you want to take that oath and be part of that community, that takes a lot. So it doesn't matter if you've been on for 2-3 months. If you're a cadet, you are still part of the system, and you're still a part of the people that have risen their hand saying they want to help our community. So I think that how communities right now, and not all communities, man, but we see the news, we see how police are portrayed and how they're looked at. And I just think it's disservice to the badge, disservice what they do every single day. Like I give it to them, bro. Like I even though I did it myself, I give it to them that they're doing it in the atmosphere that they're doing it right now. Is just amazing of what they're doing to me. So that's what that poem was about, is to understand what it takes to do that job, right? What it takes. Like when I put that line, being judged by my peers, there's so many times that these guys are doing, these traffic stops are doing, and they're second guessing themselves because they're just like, man, like if I do this, am I going to get in trouble? If I do this, am I going to get put in jail? Who's recording me right now? There's so many things that they have to like go through in their head so that they can make that call, right? And it's just, it's unfortunate that they have to face that.
It is. And now, as we're getting close to time, I want to make sure something we talk about, because we talked about things that you're doing going forward as well. And one thing that I believe is important, and it's going to be, and it is effective, and it will be, obviously, whenever we talk about technology and different resources for first responders, you have an app now. Tell us about this app. Tell us the name of it, where we can find it, like the current plans, the future plans, like just give us a whole assessment on it.
So, like I said, our nonprofit has been going on for about 4 years now, and having these tough conversations with a lot of the family members of the police officers that lost their lives. I felt like we needed to do more. So I ended up having this thought of a proactive approach to mental health. Really, if I want to be honest, my ultimate goal with it was to really, really put a dent in suicide. But I realized that going and talking to agencies and telling them, hey, it's a proactive approach to suicide prevention, that might sway them away. They're like, oh, we don't have a problem, right? Like so I was like, well, let's change it up. It's a proactive approach to mental health, because really at the end of the day, if you're being proactive with your mental health, then it actually is going to sway you away from actually taking that step, right? So of suicide. So we started at first just kind of an idea. I like I said, I did the research on proactive approaches out there for suicide prevention, and everything out there was all reactive in nature. It was labeled proactive, but when you actually look at what they did, it was also a reactive platform, or reactive way of treating or being proactive, a reactive stage. So what I ended up doing is like, so what could we do? Being a patient, I'm like, well, what is it that would have helped me? I think a lot of us, when we're going through the stuff that we're going through, is just having those checkpoints, right? Just having those times where somebody reaches out to you and be like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, let's have a conversation. Hey, encouraging words to you, whatever. Sometimes that's all it takes for you to feel like you're not alone, right? One of the biggest things that our darkness tells us is that nobody cares. Nobody cares. And what that does, it puts you into isolation. And one of the worst things you can do is be in isolation, because then the only thing you hear are those words that are telling you, nobody cares for you. Nobody's going to miss you if you're gone. They're going to grieve you for a little bit, but then afterwards they're going to forget you, whatever like that. That's all you hear, right? So I started thinking about it. I have a amazing partner. His name is Jerry Berlanga. He's an engineer, a process engineer. So I'm an idea guy. Like my ideas go everywhere, and I have to like kind of bring them in, whatever like that.
I know the feeling. Trust me.
Yes. So then I was like, I approached my partner, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this idea? There was this other company that I was going to pitch it to. And I was like, what do you think about this idea? And he loved it. And he's like, man, why are you going to pitch it to them? Why don't we do it? And I was like, I don't have the cash for it, bro. And he's like, I got you. Let's open up a company and we'll do it this way. Right. So, but then he grabbed my ideas and was like, why, instead of doing it this way, we open up a platform.
Right.
And I was like, okay. So basically what our app is, we have 3 interfaces. We have the user interface, we have a peer support interface, and we have a clinician interface, and they're all interly connected. So we utilize biometric information from wearable devices. So right now we are connected with Apple products. Eventually we're going to be connected to everything. We're still in beta mode right now. So eventually we're going to be connected to everything. But basically it provides real-time information, real-time data about you, how you're sleeping, your mood, your step count, everything, all your biometric information gets provided real time to your peer support and to your therapist to have a better understanding of how you are every day, right? So we have an algorithm that's associated to you as well. We have a 7-day baseline that you get that gets triggered at the beginning of when you start the platform, and then it re-baselines every 7 days. So it gets the best data on you every single day. It's the best data that we can get from you, and we have triggers on that as well. What I want to do, this is what I say, it's a proactive approach to mental health. So if you are not sleeping right, the system will pick it up, and then it'll send a trigger to your peer support, and then the peer support can actually reach out to you and kind of touch base, like, hey, how are you doing? So you haven't been sleeping well. Is there something that we need to talk about? Are you having some arguments, whatever like that? And that's when you get ahead of the problem. It does not become something that keeps sitting there, right? Let's just voice it out. Let's talk about it. And then at the same time too, if you're connected to your therapist, if you have a therapist, then your therapist is able to see that information. It's like, well, let's try to find strategies to be able to get you to sleep better. Maybe there's a medication you need to start taking. Maybe you need to do something different. Maybe you need to start watching electronics earlier, or maybe not drink that extra cup of coffee. So being proactive in this gives us a better understanding of how you are doing daily, which gives you better understanding how to treat you for the future, right? How to get out of those little dark moments in your life to be able to put you in a better position to succeed in life. Not get into a place where we're repeatedly giving these ugly thoughts, and we keep dumping on ourselves all the time. Now we have somebody real time on your phone that you can reach out to, that has you as their basically has best intentions for you. Correct. And it just wants you to succeed. So that's kind of the whole concept of it. Right now we are in beta mode. So I said we have about 15 officers that are utilizing the product right now, and they're helping us refine it, change it so I can better fit what they actually need. So that's all kind of in a little nutshell. There's a couple of other features that I love about what we have on there, and one that I really, really love that we did. So we have a natural language analyzer in our journal entry.
I remember you saying that, yeah.
Yeah. So we've embedded about 250,000 suicidal phrases into our journal entry. Mm-hmm. So basically, when the user starts typing in their journal entry, it doesn't make a copy. It just scans your journal entry. And basically what it does, if you start typing something suicidal, or something that's dark, it actually will prompt you, hey, do you need to speak to somebody? But at the same time, it actually sends it to your peer support. Doesn't send what you wrote, just said, hey, you might want to reach out to Antonio. Just touch base with him, whatever like that. So then peer support can actually reach out to you and say, hey, what's going on? And a lot of the times that's all we need. And I think that's the problem with when I say what is out there right now, and I'm not knocking everything, right? I'm not, but I think to solve an issue, we have to really, really dissect the resources that are out there and see how can you use these to better fit the lives and actually make a dent in the statistics of how these officers, what they're actually facing, right? And so that's kind of the reason why we established this. And like I said, we're still beta mode. Eventually, like I want to have, my ultimate goal, Mike, is to have this in the hands of every police officer once they leave cadets. Once they leave, training, they leave with this, right? Yeah. While they're in training, they have this. Yeah,
everybody has phones, so they
everybody has phones. Yeah, and everybody has wearable devices, right? And eventually, we're gonna link up to everything, to Whoop, to all of that stuff, whatever like that. The biometric information tells you a lot. Tells you a lot about yourself, right? And then also gives a lot more feedback to your therapist and to your peer support, so they can actually know how you're doing. So everybody tracks their biometrics for working out. Everybody tracks their biometrics, their sleep biometrics to see how they're doing, whatever like that. Well, it's sitting just there. Like all that information is just sitting there. Why not provide that to the people that can provide you better treatment? Right? So that's what we're doing.
And that's smart, though. I mean, I agree with all of that. Obviously, it's important to start tracking it and keeping up with it. And I think having the proactive approach, where I like the fact, especially that one feature where even if you're just writing something that may seem dark, that at least peers were like, hey, this person's just writing, not saying anything's going on, but you just may want to check on them. So that's really good. So if people were looking to find you, I mean, especially you talked about your poetry, your app, things that you have gone through up to this point, what would be the best way for people to find you?
So I'm on YouTube. It's Frontline Strong, Unbroken. That's my podcast. Also on IG, it's Frontline Strong Nonprofit. And then LinkedIn, Antonio Santana. But really, I mean, IG is probably the best way that you can reach out to me. Also, I'm on TikTok. I mean, it's Antonio's Poetry, I think it is. I don't remember my own TikTok, but yeah, it's that. But and the thing about it, man, is that if all I want to do is be able to solve a bigger problem that our guys are facing, right? That's the biggest thing. That's my mission now. So yeah.
Okay. Well, folks, if you haven't, you got a lot of ways to reach them. Don't be shy. Obviously, that's how we met. Actually, I used to meet a lot of my guests and people that I just know in law enforcement, speaking and stuff like that through LinkedIn. But as I've expanded through Instagram, I've met good people. So, folks, reach out to him. He's very responsive. Trust me, he will follow back up with you. That's why we're here. Antonio, any final words?
So the biggest thing, man. And I'll tell you this, for everybody out there, the first step is being honest with ourselves, right? That's the first step. Second step is being vulnerable. I know society says that us as men, we need to be a specific way, and I'm not trying to go into this whole toxic masculinity, whatever. My wife probably tell you I'm a toxic masculine myself, but that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is we need to be vulnerable with ourselves, man. If we can't have those internal deep conversations with ourselves and be honest with ourselves, then we're never going to get surpassed anything that we're facing. We need to have these honest conversations. And not just that, we need to reach out to our guys, bro. And we need to make our guys know that it's a place of safety when they come and ask you, hey, how are you doing? Have these deep conversations. That's the only way we're going to start passing this darkness, this ugliness that our guys face every single day, is to have these open conversations. So find your tribe, find those guys that you feel comfortable with, that you feel a place of healing. Have these deep conversations, be vulnerable with each other. That's the only way we're going to get past through this. And don't be ashamed if you are going through what you're going through. Also, the biggest thing is, if you just entered law enforcement, you haven't gone through all of this, never diminish your story, never diminish what you've already accomplished, what you've done. Your story is important. So your story might not look like everybody else's story, but it's still important and you're still making an impact. So never diminish it. So if you are hurting, if you are in this position, doesn't matter how many years you did in the service, whatever. If you are hurting, you are hurting, and you have to reach out for help. So never diminish your story.
Man, I like that. And I think that's where a lot of people can go wrong early on, because they believe, hey, I've been a rookie, or I just got off probation, or I just got out of the academy, or I only have 5 years and I haven't been in a shooting. I think we all fall in kind of that imposter type syndrome. So I do agree. No matter where you're at in your journey, if you feel something going on, go seek help. It's no point to wait and try to compare yourself to the next person, because you don't know what they've been through, and you don't know the fact that now they're going through, you don't know what they suffered through just to get to that point. And it's no point or no reason that we have to learn the hard way. Michael Laidler has been a very strong person to, if I see something happen to somebody, I'm going to try to figure out how not it happened to me. So it's important to tell your story early on. So once again, Antonio, I thank you for being on the show. I appreciate your time. I know I kind of got you up early in the morning. I know you say you're not a morning person like myself, so I appreciate you coming here with this energy, this good vibes, and just really sharing knowledge with people and letting them know that there's resources out there. There's going to be more opportunities for them to connect with you. And just, like I said, the poetry thing is something cool, because I haven't had anybody in the first 60 episodes, give or take, come and talk about poetry, and something that I'm never probably going to be into personally, but I believe there's some people out there that are into that, and they need to know it's okay. Hey, get involved. It doesn't matter who likes it, who doesn't. If it's something that helps you become a better person or a better version of you, use it to your advantage. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing a very simple poem that has no indirect messages that I had to figure out, and I'm sure people will be able to replay that multiple times, and they will be able to highlight. So once again, thank you for your time, everybody. If you haven't had a chance, make sure you reach out to Antonio. Make sure you hit him up on his social medias. Make sure, if you haven't had the chance, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow my YouTube page, the podcast. Follow me on all my platforms, because obviously I want you to follow me as well. And you have a lot of resources out there, but you got to know that the keep up with some of these good people that I have on the show is going to take following me as well. But it's not just about me, because if it was about me, I would just have a solo podcast and I would sit and record by myself, because I can. I mean, it's not hard to do that, and we see people, but ideally it's to promote other people as well. So I will do a solo podcast here and there, but it's not ever designed just to be about Michael Laidler. It's about how much can we spread and how can we be a force multiplier when it comes to our wellness, leadership, and just showing people that we're really people. So once again, Antonio, thank you. For the viewers watching, for the viewers listening, for the ones that shared it, thank you all. And I hope that we all get a chance to meet one day. If not, continue to be who you are, continue to develop yourself, and just do everything you can to take yourself to that next level. But everybody, thank you. You have a great day and be safe.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaellaidler.com and hit the website at michaellaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.
Like that, I'm going to be leaving a note. Find vehicle, advising, and